now we're going to return to our story. I'm going to turn it over to Jack McGackie. Chapter 6. A long, strange trip is planned. Now this story had just for a time hit a snag, iced in the doldrums, caught in the Sargasso, in the maelstrom. Here followeth a lengthy digression. Not too lengthy, really. Skirt round it, wary readers, if you fear the kraken in my mind. This is Robbie Gordon speaking now. All last night, it seemed these characters were pounding on the inside of my eyes, my mouth, wanting their story told. And I can't foretell all of it, nor the end. And half of them, or more, are me. It's really Mother Bear cold here on the mesa, appropriately for this tale. 10 degrees Fahrenheit or so last night. The snow and the ice won't melt. My tossing body, I'm not lying here, pun intended, pushing aside one of my 3 blankets. I was up in the loft, it's warmer there, but my wood stove goes out an hour after I crawl up and in because the coal ran out last chapter and the whale oil clogs up my chimney. And the pinon pine I have to burn doesn't hold coals worth beans. I have lots of beetle kill patchy fat wood though. So hot, it puffs like chitty chitty puff puff. No oak, no chestnut or kukui nut trees hereabouts. So I woke up cold, my long-haired tabby cat Mopsy, that minx, batting at my parked face to get me up to feed her. Remember, I've never written so much as a short story, just memoirs. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Jack McGackie now. Here we go. So everyone on all 3 ships raced to leave that place. There was so much to do. Our plans were set. The Smith brothers easily reached agreement with Kathy and me, Tsarina and Tsar, the Queen Bee and the drone, simply because when and if we reached San Francisco, she would instantly become the wealthiest person aboard. Hull Company was larger than the Smith Brothers Incorporated. We called them the cough drops. There were other Smiths, hammering at their trade on land and sea, but not as ambitious as the Hulls. No slave traders or opium traders, I found. And C.H. Hull was in Newburyport. As Russians say, God is in heaven and the Tsar is far away. So we, to be enumerated soon, boarded the Vesta and prepared to travel to Newburyport via Cape Horn. The Brilliant would accompany us south, perhaps to San Francisco, in the bitterest weather. This was for safety, coasting along the possibly ice-choked inland passage. The Brilliant would either leave us at Prince Rupert to go make some money in Hawaiians, humpbacks were there to be tortured, or else go on to squeeze in San Francisco some capitalist dollars out of blood-soaked hands. As Kathy said to me, she was now an inspired convert to what? Read on. Opium remained cheap on Vesta and hashish, but her crew demurred with exceptions. They were a sober-tested lot, the 3rd voyage for many. Getting aloft and getting high didn't mix. What a difference Vesta was. Clean, efficient, Yankee cooking, a lot of chowder. More on food in a minute, hang on. Plenty of smiles and laughter, even in the cold. And it wasn't cold, in the cabins. Amazingly, the Yanks had kept a secret. Of course they had crude oil-ready whale oil stoves. Yankee designed, made of good Pittsburgh plate iron, all thermostated and pre- and post-vented, filters, clean-out boxes, etc. They had simply hidden them all from the rebels. There were 14 on each whaler, 6 on each side, and 2 down below for the holds if necessary. Everything on their ships was symmetrical, or identical, or both. There were 4 whale boats on each, of course. Henry Ford, inventor of the assembly line, would have admired them. The stoves were brand new, and Johnny Reb Tar hadn't heard about them yet. Good old Yankees. So for months, the whalers had endured cold and muffled up when the Rebs were aboard. Actually, they kept some stoves going, like for the 4 preachers on Brilliant. But the crew were clever deceivers and distractors. And the rebels aboard were always so nervous and trigger happy that they wouldn't have noticed if the mate turned into a pig. And the smell wouldn't have penetrated either over their own, of the pig or the oil stoves. Grog and despair had made sorry inroads into the very flower of Southern seamen. And I'm going to quote William Blake here. "O rose, thou art sick. The invisible worm that flies in the night, in the howling storm, has found out thy bed of crimson joy, and his dark secret love does thy life destroy." Other concealments besides the whale oil stoves emerged. One was a real Lollapalooza. Is that an anachronism? A panjandrum, a hullabaloo, a corroboree. Aboard Brilliant, where few rebels came except to pray, and some did that, the purser and navigator shared a tiny office cubbyhole up front on the starboard side. Among the clutter of sextants, record books, and spare compasses, there was a small concealed door. Sure enough, on Vesta there was no cubbyhole but a large cabin there. Behind the little door on Brilliant was a cramped 4-bunk cabin, windowless, and there were 2 black men. The older was grizzled, bearded, with ropey arms and a strong frame, not too tall, maybe 5'10", 50 years old or so. The younger and taller of the 2 looked about 25. The older was dubbed Adam, though his name was Harry Beeler, and his young relative was known as Abel. The names will be apparent soon. The younger didn't want his other name known. I hardly noticed the 2 men for the mural. The 2 Smiths were there smirking to show Kathy and me and Lolo et al. Their secret. 2 of the bunks port side had been removed to clear the wall for the funniest painting I have ever seen. Across the wall at shoulder height was painted in oils a sea serpent. Touches of waves like Hokusai of Japan would have made. Clouds like Winslow homers above, and on and on and on. On the sea, in the painting, was a bumpy-looking ship. The bow showed scrawled letters, Lausiana, misspelled like that. The bent anchor dangled uselessly. A fish nibbled it. The decks were littered with hilarious cartoon rebels, scowling, raging, spitting, staring down into the water and firing guns, puking, etc. The guns were out but pointed up, down, and in all directions. On the deck, 3 tattooed clowns hurled spears. Under the water surface was painted, 6 feet long, a beautiful dove gray and cream bull sperm whale at full speed towards the bow of Vesta. Body rippled like waves, mouth open. Around the whale's body was wrapped 2 or 3 times a garland of pink and red roses. Clinging to this garland were dozens of happy black people, all shades. Many children, lots of nappy-headed mammies and gray grandmas. Men riding the whale like a rodeo bull, arms waving. The faces were sensitive individual portraits. That wasn't all. Up in the port bow corner was painted, where the whale was headed, an island. The Lausiana was pointed blindly the other way. The perspective of the corner as it was painted, made it seem cleverly to go on and on away back. The island was covered with trees, meticulously and accurately painted. Breadfruit, coconuts, oranges, lemons, avocados, mangoes, papayas, and others I didn't recognize. One fine old apple tree covered in red fruit. On the shore was a huge pomegranate tree. Red fruit lay everywhere. There were bees and hummingbirds. Under the trunk lay a wicker cornucopia, spilling out pumpkins, taro roots, blackberries, pears, peaches, corn, okra, even peas. Blackbirds pecked a watermelon. A grizzled black monkey ate a banana. There were hemp leaves. What were they for? I asked. Oh, that, said Harry. He was from Kentucky. As I've noted, Kentucky hemp was 60% of the U.S. crop. The world's best. Until the 1850s, anyway. Also, 6 counties, at least, in July and August, would smell like hashish. Literally. I can't believe only the slaves knew about the intoxicating powers of the herb. But massa could take their last pleasure away. In Africa, they'd smoke daga, as they called it, for eons. Now, in the painting, around the tree was wrapped a very large snake. On either side were a beautiful naked young man and woman. All 3 with the snake were eating pomegranates. All 3 were black as night. On the whale, between roses, could be seen painted in fancy red and gold circus script the words, Underwater Railroad. Harry Beale, named for a street I used to sled on, was an itinerant painter. He had escaped from slavery in Kentucky at age 20 and soon made his way to Pittsburgh, changing his name. He found a home and friends in the black sections of town, down in Homewood and Brushton, and up on the hill along Center Avenue, where the black bars were filled with steel workers. He did portraits for proud working families and street scenes, bars in yellow and red colors with drunks and passers-by, camp meetings, scenes of the crowded jumble of variegated houses on the steep hills, complete with smoke, as a man named Kane painted later on. The young man, known as Abel, was a cousin or something. Harry had been alternately touched and scarred by wartime life. Many ex-slaves came to the Hill District to be nursed and housed. In close quarters, his wife died of typhus. Gettysburg was uncomfortably close to Pittsburgh. A note from Robert Gordon. My elderly great-great-grandfather, Adjutant General Thomas Marshall Howe, former mayor, was in charge of the defense of the city in early '63. His poster screamed "To Arms" over his name in our dusty upstairs hall, above the old, worn, puppy-stained Persian rug. And now, back to our story. So Harry had dug trenches. The rebels had no love for Homewood or Brushton or the Hill District. Harry absconded to Boston. Morehouse lived there and joined the Brilliant. Next voyage, I think it was, Harry was sitting on the dock in Boston, smoking a long Dutch pipe, as he told us, when Abel appeared, also looking for a ship. He had deserted from the famed Massachusetts 54th Regiment, the black outfit of agony and glory. Ha ha, sob. Abel apologized to his Uncle Roy. I don't know why he called him that. No one else did. He said he had killed enough men, whether rebels or slave drivers or what. He didn't talk about it then. So the two shipped together. The secret cabin was pre-planned. but not for them. New Englanders are an admirably cautious race, and clever as black snakes. Our complement on board the Vesta was soon set. It was just after Christmas, never mind. And we had aboard 5 rebel crewmen, 4 missionaries, 3 hula dancers, 2 crazy lovers, and a tiger shark in a mango tree. 2 of the rebels bunked with Kathy and me. One of them was Speedy, quote unquote, the short, aesthetic Carolina corporal. The other was Bob Sanger, Louisiana's second mate. Actually, only these 2 joined Vesta. I made up the other 3 to make the song work. Sanger was well named, I thought, as his name was a synonym for blood. He was well named because his greatest weakness in his own eyes was that he often blushed deep red at embarrassment, anger, or shock. He was a shy man at heart, perhaps. Virginia, his home state, had steeled him. Although a bit short, with his wavy light brown hair and small, soft mustache, he was the perfect cavalier. His razor he stropped daily. He was an only son with 3 sisters. He carried the family name and honor and a pistol to and through the University of Virginia, Phi Beta Kappa, and on to Annapolis and the Naval Academy. He pulled out after 2 years early for the war. Best navigator I ever met, except Lolo. Also, he was a crack cannon shot from number 1 starboard gun crew in battle. Stay tuned for that story on your Marconi set or get a new Tesla. Sanger, Speedy, and I were all under 5'5" inches. Kathy topped us by 4 inches. Snow White and the 3 dwarfs, ? We 4 played a lot of chess. Bob usually won. Catherine won her share too, but she wasn't as good as Lady Howe in Paris, who beat Benjamin Franklin to his visible disgust in a famous painting. In this painting, she, regal and gorgeous in dove gray, bosom unlaced, sits calmly fanning herself with her ivory fan, as Franklin looks blackly away from the board. But then, she was a Howe, not a Hull. I had to say it. White, not black. A woman, not a man. Why did Ben care that he had lost? Because way, way down deep inside, he couldn't help thinking that some kinds of people are better than others. And God help me, sometimes I do too. I'm sorry, we're not leaving yet. I need to tell you another story. I was 15 on the farm, September. It was 1856, the year of Fremont's failed Republican run. Papa was so disappointed, but Fremont didn't win. I was just old enough and good enough to go out plowing by myself. We were fall plowing, I think it was for rye. We grew a lot of that like everybody, for whiskey, you know. It was the only stuff we could afford to cart to Pittsburgh or Baltimore either, except corn whiskey, and we preferred rye. It caused the whiskey rebellion, you know, the taxes on it. And a note from Robert, great-grandfather Davison in 1932, still wouldn't touch anything else but Pennsylvania rye whiskey. Jack speaking. That was in 1794, that is. Yes, Washington himself had to lead 15,000 soldiers, many of them veterans, against farmers like themselves in the Commonwealth, so-called, where Valley Forge is located. Many leaders of the rebellion were hanged. Terrible. They weren't even brown people, just wouldn't give the money to the coastal government. Anyway, we always had good rye. I loved the bread. Lover and Gypsy, our two horses, Mare and Gelding, had passed on. Both bloated. They got into the green hay. But now we had two even bigger horses, Percherons, the brownish-gray color of butternut hulls, same color that the South used 4 years later for their uniforms. With their huge white feet, those horses could really suck a plow through the ground, but I missed the black Belgians. They had been steady as a steam winch and gentle. But these mares, May and June, acted like show horses, tossing their manes, competing with rocks and stumps, even competing with each other. Fussy eaters, too. We were using a side hill plow as usual. Most of our fields were sloping. This device, should I describe it? Nah. This device made it possible to plow on steep spots without unhitching the horses or plow, and also all the furrows were sent downhill, making contour plowing possible and effective. It also would level out a bump or a mound in flat bottom land. So with one of these, one man and two or even one horse could make a crop, and in 2 or 3 years wipe out in the process the mound systems that hundreds of people, even children, had built and prayed over for many generations. Doomed the mounds were. If only I had known then what those redheads of Brant's knew. Where was I? Oh yes, out in that field. As the horses in the ground steamed, and they rested 1 or 2 hoofs at a time, I pulled out my 2 books undecided. Euclid or Plutarch? I decided on Plutarch's Lives. It had an English crib, that is, a translation on alternate pages, and I loved his dry and stirring biographies. I had to read. It was like an addiction. But I forced myself to only read stuff that I could learn something from, and that would help me get into Princeton. No dime novels, no petty dreadfuls. They say that Abe Lincoln was the same way. Between splitting chestnut rails or in the bunkhouse on the floor by the fire, he read. But he read law books, mostly. Well, in the middle of Plutarch's tale about the good Athenian, Aristides the Just, who was exiled, ostracized, for being so good and so fair that no one could stand him. At that moment, along the road to Gettysburg, 7 miles ahead, there came a scarecrow. A man who sort of skipped at times, lightly walked along, humming and muttering. His battered black felt hat had at least 2 holes. He had a small knapsack. Pieces of paper stuck out, and a banjo on his back, and a tin whistle. His black frock coat was of a good cut, but shiny and very worn about the buttonholes. Worn shoes, from dancing probably, I thought. White shirt, open neck, grimy, and an odd pair of brownish pants of wool or something. Yeah, maybe. It looked like he had gotten them from a black man. He said later, he did get them from a black man on Liberty Avenue in Pittsburgh. He said it helped him understand how the darkies felt. I asked him, "Who are you?" He replied, drawing himself up, "I am Stephen Foster, leaving my hometown to find my fortune in New York. Is this the right road, kind brother?" I laughed and laughed and laughed. I was 15. I said, "No, you aren't him. You made that up. Next you'll say you're Johnny Appleseed. He passed through here 5 years ago or so. He was headed the other way, with seeds and cuttings of our famous Cumberland Valley apples for his special plantings, not for the big cider orchards. He preached of angels in Swedenborg to us, sweetly. We all laughed. Say, you ain't him in disguise, is you?" I peered at him owlishly. in a comic mood. He waited patiently for my silly blather to stop as his lips twitched. He had a cupid's bow mouth and a pasty face. Then he did a sort of dance step as he unslung his banjo and began to play and sing as he danced the Camptown races. Whoa, Nellie Bell! All thoughts of geeing and hawing or Salamis, the battle of, all thoughts fled. He had a French harp, a harmonica, dented, and I played along when he played in C. I had played my oldest brother Tom's guitar, though neither he nor I were much good then. From this day, I got a lot better fast. Well, an hour or three later, the horses had grass. They were happy. Out comes Mama to see where I was stuck, only to find our hootenanny. She threw up her hands and almost bustled 3 ways at once, dear Mama, and then came up and actually curtsied to him. I'd never seen that before. We had all heard his music, although some of the best was yet to come. Pittsburgh was not far, after all. I'd been there 2 or 3 times by 15. Robert says, of course, I was born there in 1945. Jack says, anyway, that wonderful man and we played all evening. When all the local farm kids showed up, and all their black servants too, by the way, we had none, long story, we were too poor. He did the best working on the railroad, with lots of clapping on the dyna part and getting faster at the end, till all the kids, black and white, collapsed laughing. When someone asked for Zip Coon, however, he blushed slightly and murmured, please, do you like old Joe Clark? He politely wouldn't sleep in our beds. I'm grimy, ma'am, he said. But he lay down by the fireplace on a little pallet like an Irish bard. Next morning, Mama and Papa sent him off stuffed with our best smokehouse ham, cottage cheese, rye bread and cornbread, and a bottle of cider. I had lots of little papers scrawled with words. I feared for his tattered knapsack. We kids made him a bindle on a stick. He pranced with it like a soldier, whistling. We clapped and cheered. Off he went toward New York City via the cars at Harrisburg. We gave him the fare. He went to an untimely death in 1864. Readers may not know, and I did not know at the time. His family was one of the richest in Pittsburgh, right up there with the Howe family. In fact, Robert adds, in fact, there was another Foster Howe descendant romance in 1902. She was my grandmother, Alice Howe Brown Reed. He was Judy's grandfather, Preston Foster. But it didn't work out either. She married Samuel Clark Reed instead. They all courted on St. Brandon's Isle, Lake Muskoka, our place. Me too. It's in our guest book, which I have. Back to Jack's story now. Stephen Foster's father was mayor of Allegheny across the river, larger town and richer than Pittsburgh proper at the time. Stephen's brother, John, was president of the Pennsylvania Railroad, the industrial and financial engine of the entire Commonwealth. Stephen, a younger child, was the clown, the cut-up. A childish letter survives, and he mentioned it himself that evening in the warm living room. He had written, Papa, please, if you send me a whistle, oh, I would whistle, I would whistle. And he did, in a sailor hat, with a stick horse and a wooden sword. But later he began to drink heavily. When we met him, I think, yes. He certainly loved our hard cider, but his courtesy to women and children was perfect. He was a harmless fairy sprite, sent to earth to make peace through song. Yes, the answer to war is song, as we all heard when Captain McNaughton sang Amazing Grace. Song can heal differences. People who sing together do not think of who is better, nor do they kill while they are singing. Whoops, that's not true. I forgot. I forgot our cannibals and soldiers. I forgot that battle hymn of the Republic. Still, music hath charms to soothe the savage breast. Stephen knew that, and he knew the quote. Yet he died in a tenement in New York, penniless and cold, before the war even ended, and his family had long since cut him off. Even though his songs were sung everywhere by black and white, north and south. It's not easy taking in the yearning souls of two races, three nations perhaps, and two classes. The Foster family would never talk. Was it the drinking? He never married, or even came close, but he couldn't have been homosexual. Just listen to his songs. He reminds me of Hans Christian Andersen. Stephen would whistle to change the world for the better. Whistle at home. Preparations for our leaving went swiftly, unlike my tale. The most important item, food, was almost ready already. Because, you see, the Prince William Sound is one of the richest fishing grounds on earth. Even in hard winter when we were there, the king salmon were taken in nets. They swirled and danced below us in the unusually clear green waters. I was reminded of when I saw the clippers. They were cod and black cod, big halibut, and lean cod, especially tasty, down lower for long lines. In the Sound, deep, very calm green water separated green, spruce-wooded islets, perfect to hide kayaks. Because of the warlike Aleuts and their sleek kayaks, world's best, better than Eskimos, they brag, better wood supply, and other things. Fishing boats were few at that season. We saw none. And a good thing that was for them. But during the long mooring, the 8 whale boats were not idle. There was all that Japanese fishing gear. I prayed for those poor lost Japanese. We, quote unquote, took all their charts too. Some of the Prince William Sound. Lolo, Sanger, and the Smiths puzzled long over that. The Louisiana had left us all but 2 of their charts. They said, the ones to hell and to heaven. We were pulling in our crab traps with huge king crab, scariest monsters, and we had gear to take shrimp in big gulps or little, beautiful bamboo pots. We couldn't smoke or dry the stuff, no wood, no place for it on board. Whale oil was useless for that. But we, that is they, the Yanks, had floe ice for packing it, so we did that for a while. Then they found that the Aleuts were not really that warlike. More like suspicious. Whale boats and kayaks started talking. It turns out the missionaries knew some Aleut talk. More on the missionaries later. The Aleuts would trade for whale oil. They could burn it in shell lamps, not as clean as seal oil, but with a very fine small wick made of human hair, they could use it. I think they ate a lot of it too. So we'd send out a boat with a cask of it, and it'd come back with a boat full of salt. Where from? I don't know. Ruskies, maybe? Or they made it themselves? Maybe they got it from fishing. Well, what with Mother Nature's bounty, we had a stuffed hold on Vesta for the long haul around the Horn. Brilliant was stocked too, though not as much. The missionaries elected to come with us, not with the cannibals. The 4 were sent out by the Presbyterians, with Hope, Forks, an Aleut dictionary, some ethnographic notes, soap, and a Gospel of John in Aleut. For when the ignorant savages might learn to read. They bear no railway shares and no snarks. They also had 4 identical Bibles. They had been rudely rejected, these missionaries, on Kodiak and Unalaska, I think, before retreating to the Brilliant. Looking for souls, and rather liking our coalescing group, they came over. Maybe the Tierra del Fuegians wanted salvation, or chess. The missionaries were good sorts, sort of. 2 of them were renegade Jesuits, converted to the wee free kirk of Presbyterian Scotland. This difference of origin gave the 4 of them something to talk about on the endless nights. Chess was popular with them, too. Once we had a big tournament, 4-on-4. Bob Sanger tied with one of the Jesuits. The last game was watched by many. Whispered arguments in the corners. Of course, Adam and Abel came along. Adam shared my hashish and chessboard, and Abel did too. We'd get our shut-up cabin filled with smoke, then take turns blowing smoke rings at the porthole. I won. Of course, here he taught Abel to paint, and the young man was better at scrimshaw even than his uncle. On sperm whale teeth, he'd engrave a full-rigged ship, bark, sloop, clipper, East Indiaman, schooners. He could have sold his carvings to a naval college if there had been any around. Both men talked very interestingly on a wide variety of subjects, but Abel would not talk about himself to us. I guess that about completes our compliment. If I've forgotten any, I'll tell later. I was glad that no more rebels came aboard. It was strange, switching from we to they and back. Bob Sanger became a deep and trusted friend and bandmate. The first mate I was especially glad not to see aboard Vesta. He was a surly, drunken, very tall Texan. Oh, wait, there were 2 more. There were 2 more, yes. 2 Aleut men came aboard. Both about 40, it seemed, experienced. They were determined. Hold on here. They were determined to go to South America, Tierra del Fuego, to meet their relatives. From many whalers they had heard of a land there, with ice and snow and fjords and fish and timber and people. Were they like them, they asked? I sure didn't know. But I got to thinking and looking in the navigator's books. Before they got aboard, we couldn't say their names well, so as usual, we nicknamed them Click and Clack. The names were more like Clickatat and Yakkutat. They didn't like names. They did sing songs in harmony and kept time with clacking sticks. Quite moving. We all tried to talk them out of going with us. I said, look, brothers, they had pretty good English. Their Russian was good also, I learned much later. Look, brothers, where your home is, there are fjords and fish and sheltered waters, but there are also shores with big, fine trees, rivers and land animals, deer, caribou, bears, you know. But way down there, it wasn't down, and they knew it. Way down there, if you climb out of a fjord, you find a land where it never rains. They fell back, stunned. Never? Have you seen this? No, I said. But in these books it says that the Atacama Desert is the driest place in the world. It never rains, for years sometimes. The people there hang up cloths and nets to catch dew and fog to drink. Ah, but there are people there. What do they do? What animals do they eat? Agriculture was unknown to the Aleuts, except when they laughed at the Russian monks on Sitka and elsewhere. I replied, very strange animals, not like anything you've seen, and pretty hard to catch too on land. Vicuña and Guanaco are fast and agile and small. There are very high mountains, like Denali, but even more. More than Denali? Yes, truly, and higher seas. Hearing that people lived there stiffened their resolve. They said, they must be our relatives. Only we can endure that. Take us to them. Let us bring our best two-man kayak so we can leave you, even paddle home. If you grow tired, we will not. We are out of here. Our elders have sanctioned this trip. The gods approve. We are Aleut. Such talk impressed us. They brought gifts for us. Much ivory, walrus, sperm, and mammoth ivory. Thanks to Kath and me and the compliant Tweedledee and her father's faraway money, our command structure was fluid. Our group was evolving. Yes, I'll use Mr. Darwin's new term. Evolving into a group of free explorers. A commonwealth. Looking for what? A place where land was not stolen. Where animals and plants were not doomed. Where men did not need guns. And people did not think that some races are better than others. We had half the world to search for this Oleana, where brown and black people could show that they knew many things which arrogant white people did not understand. And why should we look for this land? Maybe to stay there. So, with Click and Clack taken in and their kayak stowed, we discussed our itinerary and plans. My proa was stowed aft opposite the kayak. Many of us marveled at the two boats. The proa was beat up but still impressive in design. The kayak was incredible. Maybe I'll describe it later if I can remember anymore. Kath and I mostly set our stopping places on the route. I especially got pushy. I wanted to see Sicily, not for the rundown Russian fort, but to talk to the large colony of monks. The four apostles quickly seconded this. They were very far from orthodox and intellectually insatiable. Then we all knew we had our major stop in San Francisco. Everybody wanted something there. Then the Galapagos. No water, so what? No drinking water, that is. I was well read, as you know. I'd already heard of the voyage of the Beagle in 1831, with a young naturalist aboard named Charles Darwin. Thoreau and Walden called my attention to him. At Princeton, I had heard rumors of this man's research, though he was close-mouthed. I expected much from Mr. Darwin. And I, too, wanted to see the strange creatures of the Galapagos. Did you know, reader, that Abe Lincoln and Charles Darwin had the same birthday, February 12th, 1809? I largely wished to study for myself whether they too were doomed. The creatures, not Darwin and Lincoln. Doomed like the Laysan rails and stellar sea cow by people, white people. Then we would go on to Tierra del Fuego. Then, with or without Click and Clack, on in a rush past Brazil to North America and Newburyport. There was one more stop which I had great hopes for and dreams of. I think I'd like to wait to tell you a fable, which I had heard twice, so it might have been true. It concerns the Apalachicola River, but it is not about Lorena and her bow. Chapter 7.
Okay.
You ready for a break?
Yeah.